Hello, YouTubers out there. This is Jerry Saravia at the movies. So, recently, I saw a video on YouTube with Quentin Tarantino discussing the 1979 theatrical releases that he saw that year. That is to say, in theaters, of course. So, original 1979 theatrical releases. So, this was on a podcast called Filmmakers on Film. So, I thought it would be fun to talk about films I recall seeing during my childhood in the 1970s in theaters. So first run 1970s releases. So sit back and enjoy, and I'll tell you a little bit about each one. So these are I picked out all the posters I can, at least for the films I can recall seeing, and these are not in any specific order, so here we go. Okay, so we got here the Amityville Horror. Now, this one I had seen in 1979. This is actually, well, aside from Jaws, this would be really the first official haunted house horror film I'd ever seen in a theater. And it scared the living daylights out of me. So, yeah. When I'd seen it 25 years later, it didn't scare me quite as much. But I will say there's some effective moments in it. Of course, it stars James Brolin, Margot Kidder, Rod Steiger, based on the book, which more likely is fiction. I have actually seen the house once in person, and I think we drove by it, and at that time the attic windows that look like eyes were still there. So, yeah, not the greatest film but for horror, but nonetheless one I recall seeing. This one is The Champ. This stars, of course, Jon Voight and Ricky Schroeder. It's a remake of a 1931 film. I remember it being sentimental. I don't think I cried at the end, but I don't know. I guess it's the first real tear-jerker that I'd seen in theaters. That's really all I can tell you about that movie. So we'll just leave that one alone. I haven't seen it since. Next up is The Muppet Movie. Of course, the first original Muppet movie. And I remember enjoying this a lot because, of course, I saw the show. So this was a no-brainer. And it is fun. I'd seen it many years later. It's still a fun movie. It's still fun to see all the people that appeared in it. Steve Martin, Orson Welles as, I don't remember if he played a judge, whatever it was. Huge cast. Very good film. And still enjoyable. All right. Apocalypse Now. By the way, these I'd seen in Toronto. We lived in Toronto from 78 through 80. So those 2 years, and then we were in Toronto briefly from 74 to, I want to say 76. We were going back and forth because, I was originally born in South America. So we were trying to go through all the red tape, and we were on a visa, and then eventually we settled in Canada and then came to New York City. So a lot of these I'd seen in Canada. Apocalypse Now. Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece about the Vietnam War, of course based on Joseph Conrad's novel Heart of Darkness, starring Martin Sheen and Marlon Brando, Dennis Hopper, in a small role Harrison Ford. And this film, I remember, I didn't know how to respond to it. I think I was only 8. I knew it was a powerful film experience. I didn't understand it at the time. In later viewings, I came to really appreciate just what Francis Ford Coppola was trying to say, and particularly the idea of madness inherent in the Brando character who's living in that island. It's sort of like Island of Lost Souls in a way. This is one of those films that doesn't have opening or closing credits. At least I think all we got was a program. It was like going to see a play. And we were given a program at the either at the end of the film or at the beginning. I'm not sure now. It was probably at the beginning before the film screened. So this was really the first film I'd ever seen where there were no credits at all. It was an interesting film experience for that alone. Next up is Beyond the Poseidon Adventure from 1979 or 78. I can't remember exactly. Starring Michael Caine and Sally Field. I'll put it this bluntly, I don't remember enjoying this film at all. I barely remember the original Poseidon Adventure, which I'm sure I saw on television. And I have a Michael Caine blog that I work on. That's specifically Michael Caine films. This is one I'm not going to revisit, so I'll leave it at that. All right. Next up is The Black Hole, another film I really didn't enjoy at all. This was Disney's Star Wars. Interestingly enough, that Disney eventually bought Star Wars. And it has Anthony Perkins, and I'm sure some other people, and I don't recall who. It was kind of a boring film. I just remember now I've left out another one, which I didn't enjoy, called Star Trek The Motion Picture. Another film that I found quite boring. So these two were boring. It's a film I'd like to forget, as well as this one, The Black Hole. All right. China Syndrome, starring Jack Lemmon, Jane Fonda, Michael Douglas. This was an intense thriller. I knew when I was watching it, it was intense. It was a fever-pitched thriller. It's really the first time I think that I'd seen a thriller of this nature in a movie theater. This was really quite intense, and I'd seen it many years later, and still very, very intense film. It's just it's what a thriller should be, thriving on characters and a plot that, you know, it has all sorts of turns, but you know it's going to lead to definitely a fatality by the end of the film. Based, of course, on the actual accident at 3 Mile Island, I believe. Nuclear accident. So yeah, this was a strong film. First thriller I'd seen in theaters that I can recall. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This would be the second Steven Spielberg film that I saw in theaters at that time. And this was an incredible film, including the poster. This is actually, aside from Apocalypse Now, this is one of the few posters that when I looked at it, the film was in the poster, if that makes any sense. Like when you saw the poster, you were seeing the film. Some posters are designed in such a way that they don't tell you visually what to expect. And here this was like Steven Spielberg in a nutshell. The idea of something in the distance, a light of some sort, and it's something strange and foreboding. Yeah, this was an incredible film to see in theaters. One thing in particular that I remember seeing the mothership at the end, that huge alien ship with all the lights and trying to communicate with the humans. I have to say that when you see films like this in a theater, it's so much better than seeing it on video. You're not getting the full experience. And when you see that mothership, the way I remembered it, I mean, it hasn't really been duplicated on video since I've seen it since. So, yeah, incredible film. Richard Dreyfuss is in it, of course. It's just a tremendous, tremendous movie. Okay, this was the second horror film, or third if you count Jaws, that I saw in theaters. And Amityville Horror I almost had to be taken out of the movie theater because I got scared by the pig eyes. Well, I wasn't really ever taken out, managed to sit through the whole thing. Dracula is the first film I had to walk out of, not because it was bad, but because it was just too damn good, too scary. And it was right around the time that we see Van Helsing's daughter, Lucy, with those bloodshot black eyes that just scare the living daylights out of me. This is, of course, a Dracula remake starring Frank Langella, who played the role on Broadway, and directed by John Badham. So I've seen it several times since. It is a very effective Dracula film. Same year, by the way, came out Nosferatu, the remake by Werner Herzog, which is probably the greatest vampire film ever made, aside from the 1922 silent film version. But this Dracula film is colorful, it's fun, and scary. It's a very effective movie. Yeah, first film I had to actually leave the theater. Okay, Enter the Dragon. Enter the Dragon was also seen on the double bill with Five Fingers of Death. And this, I guess, would have been my first Grindhouse film event I had ever seen. My father took me to see this. Five Fingers of Death is the second film that I had to be taken out of the theater because it was too gory. You know, when eyeballs are being taken out of somebody's head, it's that's a little graphic. But Enter the Dragon turned out to be much livelier and a lot more fun. And well, once I saw Bruce Lee on screen, It's hard to forget Bruce Lee. Of course, it stars John Saxon and Jim Kelly, late Jim Kelly, unfortunately. Directed by Robert Klaus. This is one of the great martial arts films of all time. All right, Escape from Alcatraz. I had seen in 1979, Clint Eastwood, of course, Don Siegel film. And the poster itself was also very memorable, I remember, at that time when I saw it. It was the poster really stood out. Again, just like Close Encounters, it kind of tells you everything you need to know about the film visually. And this was a effective film. I'd seen it once again on video or television. I think it was a television premiere back in the 80s. And I haven't really seen it since. I probably should watch it again someday. It's one of the best films by Clint Eastwood that isn't directed by Clint Eastwood. A prison picture, of course, based on the title. You know exactly what to expect. So, yes, terrific movie. So I guess that actually was the first Clint Eastwood film I'd ever seen. So, all right. Next up, Jaws, which I think I saw in 1976, again in Toronto. First Steven Spielberg film I saw, and technically, if you want to think of it as a horror picture, which I guess it is to some degree, first horror film I ever saw. Roy Scheider, Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss. There's really not much more you can say. Haven't written a review for this film. Some of these I haven't written reviews for. Some I have. But I think someday I will write about Jaws. In particular, my experience watching it. It has its gore moments, but it was a PG-rated film, so it was actually okay for kids to watch this movie. Despite Robert Shaw's gory death scene at the end. I mean, that was really, extreme stuff. And a scary picture. I think it's still pretty scary. Pretty effective movie. And this is the film that put Steven Spielberg really on the map. All right, King Kong, 1976 film. This came out right around Christmas of that year, so I'm pretty sure I saw it after Christmas, but I can't say for sure. The poster is a bit of a lie. You see a Kong here who is much bigger Kong than the Kong that we see in the movie. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, he seems to have more of a 70s haircut at the top, and both legs are able to stretch out on top of the Twin Towers of New York. So, yeah, if you're not too sensitive about the Twin Towers, definitely worth seeing. I remember I enjoyed the movie a lot. I always liked King Kong. I liked really most versions I've seen of it. 1933 version especially. I like Peter Jackson's homage. This one is somewhere in the middle. It's set in the 1970s. So it's a different setting. It's fun to see Jessica Lange in her first role, and Charles Grodin as an evil bastard. And, of course, Jeff Bridges, who's the good guy. Although it turns out, really, the real hero of this movie is Kong. Whereas in the original film, Kong was more of the threat. In this film, he's a bit more of the hero, and they take that even further with Peter Jackson's remake. So, interesting bit of business there. I remember I enjoyed it. I have it on DVD. I don't watch it very often, but when I do, I still enjoy it. Peter Jackson's film is probably closer to being the best version of it. And I have an affection for the 33 version, although it definitely has its flaws. And so is the 76 version, but again, this was the Kong I actually grew up with before I saw the 1933 version on TV. Usually around Thanksgiving, so, that's just how it goes. Okay, next up, Lucky Lady. Now, this film has the distinction of being, I think, the very first film I ever recall seeing in a movie theater. This was a 1975 effort by Stanley Donen and Gene Hackman, Liza Minnelli, Burt Reynolds. I would like to watch it again someday. I don't recall anything about it, except for a scene where I think all three of the principal characters are in a boat. The boat tips over and one of them falls in the water. That's really about all I can remember. But it is the first film I can have a recollection of seeing in a movie theater, to the best of my knowledge anyway. All right, Superman the movie, of course, and what can I say? I mean, this is the Superman that I grew up with. Two Supermans. Christopher Reeve's Superman, which I think is really the epitome of that character. He's the best Superman ever and the best Clark Kent. And 1978 film, of course, of Margot Kidder. It makes two films I saw of Margot Kidder in the 70s in theaters. And, tremendously fun film I revisit quite often. This is probably aside from Superman 2, this is the best film of the Superman series for sure. And for my money, the best comic book movie I've ever seen is Superman. So there you have it. And that's a DC universe, so the Marvel fans will just have to suck it up. Yes, tremendous movie. Okay. Next up, Shaggy DA. And all I know is I saw this film in Uruguay. And the only thing I remember about the Shaggy DA, aside from it being a remake, which I didn't know that at the time, obviously, of the Shaggy Dog, is the fact that at the beginning of the film they had a trailer for a Spider-Man film. And my recollection was that it looked like it was in black and white, and it showed a huge web, and there was Spider-Man, and this was supposed to be, I guess, more or less an offshoot of a couple of episodes cobbled together, if not the pilot episode, I don't remember, of the Amazing Spider-Man TV series. And that really stayed with me more so than the Shaggy DA, so that's all I got to say about the Shaggy DA. All right. Moonraker is the first James Bond movie I ever saw, starring, of course, Roger Moore, Richard Kyle as Jaws, and Lois Childs. And it was sort of the Star Wars version of James Bond, because at least the last third of the film is set in space. I still think it's an enjoyable movie. The opening sequence is it is as thrilling as you can imagine, I thought. The idea of Bond being pushed out of a plane without a parachute, I mean, that was just... I remember the theater, it's like you basically sold me on Moonraker with that opening shot. I've enjoyed other James Bond films since then, more so than Moonraker, but Moonraker holds a special place in my heart because it's the first one I saw, and but I still consider Sean Connery the best one. All right, or the best Bond. Rocky II, 1979. This is, I guess you could say this is the first sequel I ever saw. King Kong would probably be the first remake I ever saw in a theater, so Rocky II. There's really not much more to say. This is better than the original, or at least on an equal wavelength. Both are great movies. After that, something happened to the series, and it became a little more cartoonish. But it returned to its roots eventually with Rocky Balboa in 2006. This is directed by Stallone, starring Stallone, Burgess Meredith, Carl Weathers. It's basically a retread of the first film, but it builds the character, and that's really what makes it shine. So even though you still have the same climatic bout between the two opponents, yes, this is one of the best sequels. So my first sequel I ever saw in theaters, Rocky II. Running is a film starring Michael Douglas, and I know there's some other people in it. I don't recall who. And I remember the film was entertaining. I think he dies at the end while he's running a race. That's all I can remember about Running. I would like to check it out again someday. It was a drama, but it was entertaining. I think Michael Douglas made the film entertaining, but I don't know how I would react to it now. I would have to watch it again. Okay, here we got The Villain. This is, I guess, to some degree, the first Western I ever saw, even though it's meant to be a comic Western or a parody. Kirk Douglas, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Margaret. I remember Schwarzenegger very well in it. I remember I enjoyed Kirk Douglas's shenanigans, but I can't tell you what they were. I would have to see the film again. I have it on DVD, but I haven't really seen it again since. So, someday. That's all I could say about that. I remember I enjoyed it. I mean, I was a kid, so most of these I enjoyed. Some of them I did not. But I can't really tell you much more than that about The Villain. Star Wars. What can I say? 1977 or 78. I'm not sure when I saw it exactly. I know I saw it in theaters. First major science fiction type movie, even though it's not clearly science fiction. It's more of a space opera, but nonetheless, it involves more fiction than science. We'll leave it at that. Star Wars, exciting. I mean, when you see the spaceship at the beginning that seems to go over your heads, it's an amazing experience. My parents didn't like the film at all. My father in particular, because people of that generation, they thought science fiction should be, serious. And my father was brought up with, well, I shouldn't say brought up, but in his younger years, at least in his 20s, it was 2001: A Space Odyssey. Here was a film that was the complete opposite of that. This was just a cliffhanger, serial update of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon. So, and it's funny, a lot of Star Wars fans probably wouldn't even know those references now. The newer generation, or even the generation past, it is what it is. I love Star Wars, so there you have it. And that's all I got for you here. There may be some other films I saw in theaters. I'm trying to struggle. I know there were some pictures, and I can't remember which ones. It's possible that I saw Norma Rae in theaters. I don't remember exactly if I did or not. I remember seeing it, but I don't remember if it was in a theater. And I haven't, this is like Norma Rae is just something that you would see on TV. So it's probably, but it's possible. It's possible I saw Coma with Michael Douglas and Genevieve Bujold, but I don't remember exactly. Keep in mind, I was sometimes taken to R-rated movies, so Amityville Horror and and the like. So there you have it. So that's a brief synopsis of films that I saw, 1970s films that I saw in theaters. If you like what you hear and you want to hear about films that I saw in theaters in the 1980s, or a specific year of the 1980s, which would be a lot of fun to do, I can do that. That's, now you're entering my preteen, adolescent, teenage years. So there would be too many to mention in one show, but if there's a specific year, let me know if you enjoy this. So please hit like and subscribe, and let me know what you think and what 1970s films you remember seeing in theaters that made an impact on you, and which ones did not, or that you forgot even seeing. And this is Jerry Saravia at the Movies, signing off.